Hello there, watching the press preview, a first look at what is on the front pages. Time then to see what's making the headlines with the journalist and broadcaster Jenny Kleeman and the PR consultant and Conservative candidate in the upcoming general election, Alex Deane. Welcome to both of you. So plenty to discuss. Let's take a look at the front pages, shall we? Starting with the Financial Times, reporting that Israel has threatened to expand its offensive in the Palestinian city of Rafah, with mediators said to be struggling to keep ceasefire talks on track. According to the Eye, the UK government has warned Israel it runs the risk of committing war crimes if it doesn't protect civilians in Rafah. Responding to the news that the King won't be able to see Prince Harry while he's here in the UK, the Metro has the blunt headline, "Sorry, son, I'm a bit busy." The front of the Mail says Prince Harry was forced to admit his father, the King, was too busy to see him after he flew in from California. The Times leads with new rules to curb social media algorithms, pushing harmful content towards children. The Telegraph also leads with protecting children online, saying children under 13 will be kicked off social media platforms. The Guardian reports that Garrick Club members have voted to lift the ban on women joining the club. The Express hears from the former Immigration Minister, Robert Jenrick, who seeks to dispel what he calls the myths that migration contributes positively to Britain's economy. The Mirror reports pubs will stay open until 1 a.m. during Euro 24 semi and final nights if England or Scotland make it through in Germany. And the Star's fixation, it says here, with boffins continues. Apparently, they've now discovered that bacon sandwiches can shrink your brain. A reminder, by scanning the QR code you'll see on screen during the programme, you can check out the front pages of tomorrow's newspapers while you listen to our guests. So let's head straight to Jenny and Alex. Welcome to both of you. Gosh, lots to talk about. Come to Harry and Stormy Daniels in just a moment. But first of all, Jenny, why don't we, bring ourselves up to date with what's happening at Rafah on the ceasefire and the latest in this Gaza war?
Well, Israel have taken control of a very important border crossing, the border crossing between Israel and Gaza at Rafah. It means that aid cannot get through in as much as it was able to get through beforehand. And the point of all of this is this is a sort of symbol of Israel's defiance in the face of negotiations that were taking place. There's sort of Egypt, Qatar brokered ceasefire plans that were accepted by Hamas have been rejected by Israel. There was some footage that came out that the IDF released, which the Guardian refers to here, about tanks flying Israeli flags, crushing a concrete sign reading "I love Gaza." Many sort of images that will be quite worrying and disturbing, particularly as we know that after so many months of this conflict, aid is desperately needed. People don't have places to go, and there's always been this fear of a kind of wider escalation in Rafah. At the moment, this is just a question of the border being taken over. And
the 100,000 people who've been told to move as well. To an area that UNICEF today described as sand dunes, but it does have some humanitarian help in it, but the suggestion is not enough for the numbers who would need to go there.
Yes, absolutely. And also there is a sense, I think, among people in Gaza that, a lot of the people who are in Rafah have moved from Khan Yunis, and they moved from Gaza City to Khan Yunis. And there is this sense of that they are going to be perpetually in motion. I mean, Israel reiterating its stance that, the only way to eliminate Hamas is to go into Rafah, to exterminate the tunnels there. But, this is a very, I think, for all concerned here, this is, it is terrible that this is happening at this stage. There are families of Israeli hostages on protests in Tel Aviv today, saying that every day that goes by is another day when hostages are dying, or at least, very least, are not being released. And it is a shame that we haven't been able to make progress. That Israel and Hamas have not been able to find a way of releasing the hostages and having a ceasefire.
Well, let's go to the FT then. Israel threatens a wider Rafah assault, because at the moment nobody's sure whether this move to the Rafah crossing is part of a hardline negotiating tactic, do they?
Well, it seems to me the distinction that you were drawing out with Jenny about the difference between going into Rafah per se and taking over the border crossing is actually vital here. The Times is reporting that discreetly, the Netanyahu regime has reassured the Americans that this is them offering some restraint. That, there are forces within Israel that want to go the full hog. They want to go in and take over Rafah per se, and the restraint being shown by Israel is to say we can control this border, and I don't think they can keep aid out for long at all. Just realistically, pressure of the international community, humanitarian suffering on the ground will mean that that border crossing will be functioning for aid, albeit the Israelis, I imagine, will be wanting to impose significant restrictions or searches and checks on what comes through. That one of the things is Hamas allowing things that are not meant to be aid into these areas. But they are not going the full hog, because what the people to the right, and there are, the people to the right of Netanyahu in his coalition, without whom he doesn't have a majority, are saying, you're being too soft, you're not going far enough. And you can appreciate the position that the Netanyahu regime is in now, because if it doesn't seem to satisfy the demands of those who want proper redress for what happened on October the 7th, his government will fall. Yeah. And at that point, I don't think that's in anyone's interest either. Whatever you think of Netanyahu right now, the Knesset in chaos, not having a functioning government, is not a good idea either.
Yes, and I mean, there was confusion over whether Erez in the far north of the Gaza Strip was also closed today, which has only just opened to bring in aid as well. Normally a foot crossing, isn't it? The Eye as well, UK gives Israel war crimes warning for a Rafah invasion. Certainly the Israeli government spokesman today was saying this is about getting the last 4 Hamas brigades. We can't say we'll get everybody, but it will stop them being able to organise against us, which they can currently do. But, as we see, the international community extremely nervous about this still.
Yes, although, I mean, you do have to question whether or not Netanyahu is anything but oblivious to the criticism of his allies, apart from the US. He cares about his political survival. Of course, a collapse of the Knesset would not be in anyone's favour, but pandering to some quite extreme factions in the coalition is also not going to be in anyone's favour either. And the objectives of this war are get the hostages back and obliterate Hamas. And obliterate Hamas is this broad idea, like a war on terrorism. There is one way of obliterating Hamas, which is to obliterate all of Gaza, and then you will have got rid of all of Hamas. You can take that idea extremely far. And, I would really like to believe that this is just an incursion, this is just a little bit of showing that Israel can take the border and they're not going to go further. But we know that Israel's prepared to go further than anyone, would ever fear. So I think everything's still in play.
I agree with you that the aim of eliminating Hamas is a very difficult one, properly and truly to define, and not least because much of its leadership is not in Gaza anymore, is taking refuge in other countries. But the elimination of Hamas as a functioning fighting force is a legitimate and identifiable activity. It's all the harder because they hide behind civilians and that they put themselves in places making them difficult to identify, but it's still a legitimate objective that any country that had been attacked in the way Israel had been would recognise. But the second objective is worth bearing in mind too. Netanyahu in his statements today says if you just release one hostage, we might avoid further violence. And I know that people will say, well, that's just posturing, but if you were a family of some of the people that have been taken hostage in these situations, you wouldn't think that's just pandering.
If you were a family, you would be really cross that there hadn't been, more cross is the wrong, you'd be furious that November was the last time there was any significant release of any number of hostages. There must be. This is a political failing that there has not been more progress.
It's not just a political. I accept that in the course of a to and fro negotiations there can be fault on both sides, but the fault about releasing hostages is to do with Hamas.
Of course, who are the hostage takers. But really, I mean, it is not a sign of great leadership that Israel is where it is at the moment.
It's just worth bearing in mind as we see headlines like this that Israel is our ally and Hamas is a prescribed terrorist organisation in this country. There is a right and a wrong here.
Well, in that context, let me read the quote of the Deputy Foreign Secretary, Andrew Mitchell, who said the government has been clear there would have to be a plan which respected humanitarian law if they went fully into Rafah, and we have not yet seen such a plan.
If Britain were attacked and 1,000 of our citizens were killed and hundreds were taken hostage, the idea we would have to present a plan of our intended response to Israel before we got on with it, I think would be laughed out of Parliament.
But Israel's been getting on with it for 6 months now. Do you know what I mean? Yeah. This is not a sort of initial response to a terrorist attack.
I don't think that the time ticks down to the point at which other countries get to say, now I get to referee what you do and don't do.
But there is international law and there are human rights and there is a humanitarian crisis there. And, you know, it should be possible
but you're not suggesting Israel has actually broken a humanitarian law, are you?
Well, I mean, there are many people who would suggest that Israel has, and there are many things that are being investigated at the moment.
We'll move on, if you don't mind, just because I want to pack in this story, which we've been fascinated by all day. Top of the Times, not the lead story. Stormy Daniels agreed Trump hush money deal for safety. Goodness. The details today, Jenny, in court.
Look, are you coming to me because you want me to give those details, Anna?
I'm not sure.
I'm not sure that I can. There were a lot of times where details were given, and then Trump's attorney said objection.
As far as the satin pyjamas.
And we'll go as far as the satin pyjamas, but there were things. There were rolled up newspapers. There were various other things. There were positions that were described. The judge said there was too much detail. What an incredibly unedifying experience for somebody who is running to be president of the United States to go through, you know, but this is not enough to stop him from being a candidate or to lose him support.
That's definitely right. These things are, I'm afraid, baked in. It's deeply unedifying, of course. And I thought you were reporting earlier from the United States about the coalition of people that came together to give Trump a win in 2016 and wasn't as solid for him in 2020, consisting in large part of evangelicals and suburban women and so forth, some of whom this evidence really might repel. But it is worth bearing in mind, people have known, I don't think people have thought that Donald Trump had a spotless sex life for quite some time. And I remember, whilst of course I look too young, I remember being in the United States during the latter Clinton days, when a newspaper said of another allegation against Bill Clinton, here we go again. You know, it was just baked in, and no one was surprised anymore. And I almost feel, I mean, unless the allegations are really unpleasant and so forth, and so far it's that he was dishonest about financial matters and so forth, not about these other things that we can't talk about. That sexual side of Donald Trump's life, I don't think is going to lose a million votes.
Let's just take a look at the Mirror as well. Again, it's not their lead story, but it's the bit that would make you open the newspaper. Probably is what it is, isn't it? As well, Trump's stormy day in court, and elsewhere, we've just heard as well that the Mar-a-Lago case, that he took, allegedly classified documents and stored them inappropriately, showed them to people as well. Yeah. That has been indefinitely delayed.
I think that when the history books are written about the Trump administration, whilst about the Trump trials, whilst you get in the Guardian reports that Stormy Daniels was startled by her sexual encounter with Donald Trump, which is probably how I imagine many of us might feel about a sexual encounter with Donald Trump, but that they will feel that they got them the wrong way round. And they front-loaded the kind of gaudy bits, the most kind of eye-catching stuff. And the really serious things that might actually have made a difference got backloaded so much now that you're not even going to have them heard before the election.
Which is taking classified documents, some very serious about nuclear capabilities and, sedition and trying to change the result of a fairly won election.
Yes, I mean, this is very serious stuff. But again, Donald Trump has always used a playbook where he is able to spin all of this as saying, look how threatened the establishment is by me. They are prepared to throw all of this in my path to try and stop me from going out on the campaign trail. That is what the Republican line is as well. And he's always able to play this to his advantage. I don't think this is going to sway any undecided voters one way or another.
Yeah, well, it's all absolutely fascinating, isn't it? We'll see what happens next with that. Coming up, though, we will discuss the fact that the King won't have time to see Prince Harry while he's in the UK. Get the reaction to the newspapers about that. Well, welcome back. You are watching the press preview with me once again, Jenny Kleeman and Alex Deane. Welcome back to both of you. I know you have to read your phones to see the inside pages because we just get the front pages sometimes.
Thank you.
I do understand, but we'll come on to online safety in just a moment. But anyway, first of all, the King and Harry, the Metros take Alex, sorry, son, I'm a bit busy, which actually, for Wednesday might be true, to be fair to the King. But
and
anyway.
his schedule does seem busy, but it's surprising that you can't squeeze in a little time to see your son. I think this is really sad. I mean, many will say Prince Harry has made his bed and he can lie in it. He's chosen to go and live on the other side of the world. He's either had or encouraged others to have on his behalf significant tiffs with an institution he lived in all his life and understood the rules therein. But I still think in the end there is a family point to this that you can't get. It's irreducibly sad. You can't get away from the fact that a father and son should be able to speak to each other, especially when the father has cancer.
And the Mail, which has had its own ructions, as we know, with Prince Harry. Harry's reunion hope is dashed. A somewhat sympathetic sounding headline, to be fair. He here for the Invictus Games, the 10th anniversary, the King hoping to go to one of the first Buckingham Palace garden parties of the season and so on. But, it is, not even a cup of tea.
No, and you can always make time for your children. You can always make time for your children if you want to. I mean, the thing is, you can understand where this is coming from in that a large part of Prince Harry's living has come from mining the private details of his family for material. And you can imagine, you can empathise and think, surely every member of the royal family that is dealing with him is going to think, is this going to be in the next book because he got a serial book deal, or the next documentary? And it just shows how seriously bad things are in that family, that even when his father has cancer, his father will not make time.
And is it deference to William and Catherine? Because of their rift?
Maybe, but I think Jenny's probably right. Somebody's advising the King, you're better off not seeing him at all than giving the window.
Giving him material, that's how he makes his living.
If you, at the end of, in between formal events, if you say, you come and stand there, and as we come by, we'll have a quick hello, and then we'll all be able to say we've seen each other, even if we're not getting on that well, and perhaps, who knows, we'll get on. It's the absolute position of not seeing him. That's the sad thing.
Very quickly, only 40 seconds if you don't mind, the Daily Telegraph and the Times both talking about how the online safety bill will be enacted for younger people, for children.
Yes, Ofcom is going to be in charge of ensuring that social media platforms are going to have to install very tough age checks to stop children from accessing content, dangerous content, but also content if they're younger than 13. And if they don't cooperate, they will be able to fine these social media companies 10% of global revenue, or £18 million, and block their services, which is a really enormous, significant step. So there's going to be ID that children must show. The argument in the past has always been, you can steal your older brother's ID.
Yeah, you just say you're older than you are.
I do think that level of friction would stop a siglignificant number of children trying. So, yes, it's imperfect, but it will stop children from trying.
If you make a rule, many people obey it. My concern is about a cliff edge, where people don't have any exposure to 13, and then whack, here comes social media.
Very good point, very good point. Anyway, see you later. Thank you very much indeed.